Hello and welcome to Precontation Points Video Snark. I read bad books so that you don't have to. I'm continuing my read-through of Breach by KI Lynn. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Please be warned that this review contains adult material. I try my best to use metaphors and be vague, but sometimes you have to talk about a rooster. Chapter 9. Some time passes, and Delilah does the stupid thing every protagonist in a romance novel featuring a broken party does. She starts to fall in love. Granted, the narration doesn't call it that, but I've read more than my fair share of romances to see this for what it is. Nathan keeps coming to Delilah's apartment around midnight where they're together physically before they fall asleep. However, one night he doesn't come to her, so she goes to him. As she is being with him, she decides that this is the cure for her insomnia. Which is great and everything, but I feel like there's an M word that could have cured you if that was the case. Something that doesn't involve getting your feelings hurt and both of you getting fired. Anyway, it's on that night when Delilah is in Nathan's bed that he starts to have nightmares. He screams out in his sleep, which naturally wakes her up. He takes some pills, but seems almost embarrassed that Delilah caught him being so vulnerable. She comforts him and they fall back asleep. Later, Caroline and Delilah are at a bar when Caroline pointedly says that she knows Delilah is getting some. She can tell because they've known each other for 5 years now. She wants to know all of the details, but Delilah thinks that it's too much. She knows that Nathan is damaged goods, and she thinks that she's not going to tell his secrets to protect him. Never mentioned is how she shouldn't be blabbing about Nathan's secrets while only knowing a tiny portion of them. Even if she did know, it's honestly kind of a terrible thing to tell an unrelated third party somebody else's business. Nor is the fraternization rule in the office ever mentioned. Delilah tells Caroline that his name is Christopher with the idea that she saw in some official paperwork that it was Nathan's middle name, and that they'd met at the club the other night, but she goes on and says that the dude is damaged goods and she isn't sure how he feels about her, but Caroline is of the opinion that with Delilah's low self-esteem, the two of them can help each other. Later, Delilah proves exactly why it is that the office has a non-fraternization rule, because she's super distracted by just the thought of Nathan, and she isn't able to get any work done as a result. Despite them sitting in the same room together, Nathan keeps sending her dirty texts. They're interrupted by random coworkers, some guy named Ben, coming by. Delilah's face is flushed, and he decides that it must be because she's sick. And maybe it's just because I'm writing up these notes at 6:30 a.m., but is this sentence an incoherent mess? I'm not sure what's wrong with Delilah is contagious. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. I can half tell where the author was going with that sentence, but then it just suddenly fell apart. Editors? Who are they? And then, because this is a romance novel full of men who say and do romantic things, Nathan calls Delilah a drunk. I mean, it's true and everything, but damn, son, you didn't have to murder her like that. They continue to work until Ben comes by their office to say that everybody else is gone. Now that they're alone, Nathan closes the door and starts ordering Delilah around in an adult way. However, after he finishes in her mouth, he tells her to get back to her papers. He says that this is punishment for how she'd been chewing on a pen earlier. Delilah is kind of upset, especially since being on her knees in front of him has her all hot and bothered, but he says that it serves her right. And I'm okay with stuff like this. Hell, on the surface level of this, it's just an act between consenting adults. But this entire book just rubs me the wrong way. Nathan denying Delilah in combination with his previous poor behavior? No. I'm not having any of this. No thank you. Chapter 10. Things are kind of awkward as they return to the apartment building. Delilah thinks that it's because he broke down and they did stuff at work again. And they're at that brink where they're falling for each other hard, and feelings are for sure going to get hurt pretty quickly. Delilah invites him in for dinner, and then decides to make awkward small talk. This story takes place in Indianapolis, if anybody cares. I know I don't. As much as I hate the constant banging and toxic behavior from both of them, at least it's not this forced awkwardness for the sake of being awkward. Get back to banging. Delilah then mentions that Nathan's been letting her see more and more of his true self. He doesn't seem to mind it and says that sometimes it's nice not to have to pretend all the time. He then gives this rant about people knowing about your aches and pains, and I agree with him about it, but not the cringe-inducing emo way that it was presented. The message being that you don't have to constantly tell every single person in the world about the stuff that you've endured, and that it's okay to keep the heaviest stuff to yourself. He goes on and presses her about her rock-bottom self-esteem. She insists that she is working on it, but the book hasn't exactly done anything to show us her working through it. I also think it's a little hypocritical of Nathan to tell her not to hide from stuff because it doesn't go away, because the narration also hasn't shown us Nathan doing anything to get over his own issues aside from taking unknown substances in the middle of the night. Now, granted, this story is told from Delilah's perspective in first person, so maybe he is getting help, but I feel like if this book wanted to talk about people getting over various past traumas and mental issues, the narration should go out of its way to include stuff like that, instead of making me sit there glaring at Nathan and saying, "Pot, kettle, black." After literally 2 full pages of this, Delilah finally tells Nathan that yes, she is seeing a therapist about her issues that stem from when she was quite young, but in the same breath, she also acknowledges that she drinks to help remove some of her problems. And it's great that the book is even hinting at the idea that Delilah's behavior isn't good, but it honestly needs to do so much better than subtext of why this is bad. But Nathan at least has enough wits about him to ask if him attacking her that first time had anything to do with some of her behavior. But much like everything else she said in this conversation, she kind of brushes it aside and dismisses the idea. Delilah then starts trying to make dinner, but Nathan distracts her. She begs for his rooster, saying that she's been thinking about it all day. The next couple of pages are exactly as you would expect. But immediately after they finish, Delilah starts crying. Nathan freaks out, as I think anybody would. He promises to stay there with her that night. Then a pot on the stove starts to boil over, and Nathan suggests that maybe they should order in rather than to have her be near boiling water and the stove in general. They order Chinese, and she tells him that she's his right before she falls asleep. Chapter 11. Some more time passes, although Nathan doesn't say anything about Delilah's weird words. However, she can tell that Nathan is constantly on edge. She calls him a ticking time bomb and goes on to explain that he's waking up nearly every night with nightmares and that he appears to be taking way more medication than before. And then, because it has been a while since the book last slammed on a woman, we then get around to the actual plot again. Boop Squad number 3, Tiffany, is in the office, and both Nathan and Delilah have an uninterrupted view down her shirt. Why neither Delilah nor Nathan have said anything about inappropriate workplace behavior or clothing to Jack is beyond me. I was pretty sure if I hadn't been there, she would have taken it as an invitation to mount him. I feel like everybody in the entire building needs to have a mandatory class on inappropriate workplace behavior. However, Delilah can't help but explain to the readers that she's seen him sneaking peeks at some of the other women in the office. She knows that he's not interested in them that way, but she keeps trying to reassure herself that it's not like she and Nathan are in a committed relationship anyway, which, sure, just keep telling yourself that, honey. She briefly thinks about the time that she tried to ask him why Ian had called him a playboy earlier, but apparently the dude doesn't really mess around with all that many women. And considering the way that he's treating Delilah, I'm honestly not surprised, as I keep saying the guy really needs to work on himself before he should think about being with anybody. The proof of why this is something Delilah said at the start of the chapter. She herself referred to him as a ticking time bomb. Nathan pulls Delilah out from her musing by asking her what has her so distracted that she missed Tiffany finally leaving. They start sending flirtatious texts. But this is mercifully interrupted by another employee calling them to come to what's apparently a last-minute meeting. When they get into the room, Delilah is upset to see Andrew there, and Nathan isn't exactly thrilled at the sight of him either. As you might have guessed, Andrew is there because he's taking a job with the law firm. Delilah knows that the Boop Squad seems to have their target set onto Drew now. The others are randomly surprised that Drew and Delilah know one another, which is a giant case of, tell me you know nothing about how lawyers work without telling me you know nothing about how lawyers work. Lawyers love networking and referring clients to other lawyers. The only surprising thing is that nobody else in the building seems to know Drew. The meeting breaks up and Delilah leaves with Nathan to return to their office to get back to work. However, Andrew proves that he doesn't understand the meaning of workplace harassment and physically picks Delilah up by way of greeting. They talk briefly about their interning days. Drew makes a painfully awkward Star Wars reference and calls the company where they now work the dark side. I'm guessing that it means that he left the huge company to go work for a smaller firm or to even set out on his own, but when that failed, he ended up back at the big company instead. Delilah just feels awkward and weird talking to her ex-boyfriend like that. She also has to calm down Nathan when she gets back to the office. Andrew's first day was supposed to be the day after the introduction, but Delilah didn't see him at all, and she was happy about that. Thanks for listening to my book, Snark, on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to support me. The first is watching this video as well as all of my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book, Snarks, always free and updated every morning. And if you've already read all of my main snarks, and you can find even more snark on my Patreon, you can access it for $1 a month. Plus, you also get early access to my main Tumblr snark. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snarks so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $3 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well. $3 for every 5,000 words. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of erotic short stories and now 2 full-length novels. I also sometimes run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering more things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys. Good Lord. As much as I hate the concept... Oh, that's gross. But this is mercifully interrupted by another employee calling them to come to what's apparently a mass... But this is apparent...